Welcome to Ghoulish. I am Max Booth, a host, and today on the program I am talking with Daniel Kraus, author of The Living Dead, co-authored with the late, great George Romero. Today on the program I am talking to Daniel about zombies, about his new book, about collaborating with a man who passed away, a legend, I should say, and that's all we'll talking about most, I guess. This is a podcast where I pick one topic and one topic only, and I stay on that path, no matter the cost. I never stray away, because that is the dedication I give to my audience. My ghouls, as I think I have to call them. I don't know. Do I call my listeners ghouls? Maybe. Maybe I call them friends. Hello, friends. I like that. Will you be my friend? Maybe. So before we go on to the program, I do have to bring in my co-host, Dylan. Hi.
Hi.
Now, Dylan, sit down. Please, sit down. Thank you for joining us before we get into the main episode. Now, I have a few questions I wanted to ask you. Some pre-game questions. Now, I'm talking to a man who wrote a book about zombies. And now you have some experience with zombies as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so go right ahead and tell me what you know about zombies and what type of personal experience you have with them.
Well, they always say brains.
Do they always say brains?
Yes.
Now, a fun fact, Dylan, they did not say brains in the original Night of the Living Dead. They only said that in a movie called Return of the Living Dead. Most zombies don't talk.
Oh.
I thought you came to this podcast prepared to school me on zombie knowledge.
Nope.
But it doesn't seem like you know anything. It doesn't seem like you know a goddamn thing about zombies.
Nope.
Now, if you were a zombie, what would you do?
Well, let's see.
Picture this. You get bit by a zombie. You do everything you can to prevent the disease from transforming your brain into a flesh-eating monster. You do not succeed. You now are a zombie. What is step one? What do you do?
Well, I go to for a person.
You go searching for someone.
Yes.
Get you hungry.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, you're a zombie. You gotta get some grub. So what type of person are you gonna try to eat?
Like one that's like alone and there's like no one there.
Do you have a lot of experience watching people who are alone?
No.
No. So how do you know if someone's alone? What if they have a friend close by?
Well, I'll go to the friend first.
Oh.
Then.
So that person isn't alone.
No.
Now, have you thought about imaginary friends? Do they count? So if you see a person, but what if they have an imaginary friend next to them? Would you still choose that as a good food to target?
Yeah.
Now, can you eat an imaginary friend? Have you tried?
No.
I mean, you don't know for certain. You could.
Well, I guess.
Now, let's before we end this little segment, I do have a question. If I was a zombie, what would you do?
I would run, scream.
You would run screaming.
No. I would help you.
You would help me.
Yeah, to try to get you to come back to life.
So, would you, if I was a zombie, would you go and find people to bring back so I could eat them?
No.
Because that's a crime.
Yes, that's a crime.
And we don't commit crimes on this podcast, right?
Yes.
At least we don't admit to doing crimes, right?
Yes.
But really, we love doing crimes. Right?
Yes.
You want to go rob a bank?
No.
Why not?
'Cause is.
After we do this episode, let's go steal a vehicle.
No.
And that's all we have for Dylan Talk today. On to the program with Daniel Kraus talking about The Living Dead. Now, Dylan, before you go, we end every intro by laughing like a lunatic and then coughing. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And you said there is profanity editing, or there's not?
Oh, there's not. My bad.
All
Yeah,
right.
you can say anything you want. You can say a but if you wanted to. I would be okay with that.
All right.
All right. So I want to begin by kind of going back a bit. You have been involved with books like The Shape of Water, Trollhunters, now The Living Dead. How did you become this person that gets involved with famous old directorial collaborations?
I mean, I have no idea. It's funny that I've done 3 collaborations now, because I don't feel like somebody who naturally wants to collaborate in that way. It's funny. I used to be more involved in film. I used to be a sort of a documentary director. And one of the reasons I got out of that is because I prefer working alone. So it's kind of ironic that I ended up doing all these collaborations. And generally I like sitting here in my office day after day and speaking to no one and, beholden to just myself. So it is bizarre, but it's been good too. I think it's been when you work with somebody else, it's like and you know this, but it's kind of like having a sparring partner in a way. Like it beats you up a little bit in a way that's probably healthy. Like it makes you look at things a different way, or you just have, little places of conflict with me, which makes you have to come up with creative solutions. I wouldn't want to collaborate on every book, certainly, but it has been a more enriching experience than I would have guessed.
Yeah, I get that. I've collaborated a few times, and it is extremely different because you get used to not having anyone sitting next to you physically or on the web not telling you what to do. But if it's just you, I mean, you just exist within one head, but then all of a sudden you suddenly have to answer questions and also ask questions to somebody else, and it becomes a whole different experience.
Do you feel like it's been how do I phrase this? Do you feel like, has there been moments for you of combativeness, like not in a negative way really, but sort of in a way where both of you have different opinions on something?
So the most recent example is Tylable, but I'll go ahead and tell you that. I am doing a book with Michael David Wilson. I believe you know him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it takes place in Austin, Texas, and we keep battling about what drink the protagonist should have. I believe he should be drinking Big Red, because that is what you drink if you live in Austin, Texas. And Michael, he lives in England, no, he lives in Japan now, and he does not know what Big Red is, and he refuses to accept this edit on my end, so we've been fighting quite a bit.
Yeah, the beverage choices will really shut down a novel, for sure.
Yeah, we might have to cancel this book. Something else I've noticed with collaborating, especially on a book that is kind of a comedy, is the way we do it is I write like a few chapters, I send it to him, he does a few chapters, and we seem to be trying to out-funny the other person. Like, okay, I'm going to write this scene only because I know it's going to make him laugh. So it becomes less of writing for an audience, maybe, and more just writing for the person you were writing with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, I think one of the things that spurs me on as a writer in general is a kind of competitiveness. Like, I do want to be the best writer I can be, and I want to, I want people to read this stuff and be kind of wowed. And I think when you're working with a collaborator, particularly one who you really admire, before you even get to wowing the audience, you've got this other person who's going to read it right away. And it makes you, or makes me anyway, really want to impress them. So maybe I'm not writing something funny, but if I'm writing something dark or something moving, like I really want to impress them and make them think, okay, this person was worth collaborating with.
Yeah. And I don't know if that makes it more difficult or maybe easier, because when you don't have a collaborator, I mean, like speaking personally, I'm trying to have that same thing, but with a faceless audience.
Hmm.
But with a collaborator, you know who you are writing for, so maybe that does make
Yeah.
it a bit easier.
Yeah. I wonder if that's true. I haven't thought of it like that, but I, if I guess there's probably a sense to it for me that you're trying to impress or appease or make enjoy your first reader, whoever that is. And a lot of cases, in most cases, for me, that's my editor. Uh, but if you were collaborating, yeah, the first person is going to be your collaborator.
Did
Huh.
you meet George before you began writing this? Was he already
Um,
dead when you got attached to the project? How did this
I mean,
happen?
I had met him before, but no, but I wasn't. That was just sort of socially. It wasn't. Didn't have anything to do with this project. So yeah, he had passed away in 2017, and that was a good. I don't remember how many years, but it had to be close to 10 years since I'd last seen him. And y- you know, a lot of time had passed. It was not something in my mind. I sort of vaguely knew that he had been working on a book on and off, just because I would read that in interviews and stuff. But it really came out of the blue. I think it was less than a month after he died is when I got the call from his wife and manager. So it really was a kind of a shock.
Yeah. Do you like? How was? I can't. I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this question without sounding rude, because I don't mean it as being rude. But like, why will you chosen specifically for this project? I'm glad you will. I mean, this book is really good. I wonder like what was that decision like?
Yeah, I mean, I'll never know for sure, but I think that they were aware, this sort of George Romero estate, his manager and then his wife, were sort of aware that I was a Romero acolyte. And I wasn't specifically a zombie person. I wasn't someone who had just written a bunch of zombie books, which I think might have been a more obvious direction to go in. But I was somebody who was a great student of all of Romero's works, sort of equally, his more obscure works as well as his zombie stuff. Uh, and I think, in addition to that, I had just come off a couple successful collaborations. Like I had Troll Hunters was in the book, Shape of Water was either just out or about to come out. So I had done these somewhat higher profile collaborations that sort of, in theory, had proven that I can work with someone else in a successful way. Um, and again, I I think I was a slightly outside the box idea, in the sense that I wasn't, I wasn't a. I wrote horror, but I also wrote these sort of other things that were, I don't know, sort of maybe more emotional than some horror stuff is. I don't really know, but I feel like with anyone you choose, unless it was like Stephen King or somebody, but even then, I'd argue that that would be the wrong choice. There's going to be ups and downs, I think. I don't think that you would find anyone who would have taken it as seriously as I did. Like I approached it as if I were, yeah, working on a Lost Da Vinci or something. Like I took it really seriously, and did tons of research and acted like it was the most important, half finished novel in history. So I've kind of come around to having to feel like they made the right choice. I mean, I have no option for my own like sense of self, and to make myself be able to sleep at night. Almost at the beginning, I had to convince myself, all right, they've made a decent choice here. Otherwise, there's no way I'm going to be able to approach this thing.
Yeah, I think I would have gotten like paralyzed with the question, "Why me? Was this a prank? What's going on?"
Yeah, I sort of moved past that as quickly as possible. I didn't think
Excellent.
about why me. I just thought about, okay, what do I do next?
So we will talking about collaborating, but what is it like collaborating with someone who passed away?
Well, that's the crazy thing about this book is that you would think it would have been really different. Like that back and forth that I was just talking about, you would think that would just not be there, but it kind of was. There was the material for this book kind of came in three echelons in a way. There was the initial partial manuscript, and I had that, and then I did all my research, which took months. And as the author's note goes into great detail, that involved, a long process of reading and listening to every interview of his I could, and scholarly analyses of his books, and all his commentary tracks, and all that stuff, just tons of it. Uh, and then interviewing his wife and getting sort of a sense of all the works of art that were really important to him, and then studying those works of art to figure out, okay, if he was so inspired by this movie, for example, what was he inspired by, and can I be inspired by the same thing? So I was really trying to use his loves to influence sort of to help build the scaffolding where they were missing pieces of the building. Uh, and from there it was that was the sort of the first echelon. So I started to write the book. So I'm maybe a few hundred pages into it, and then essentially we find more or less another 100 pages of the book, or in this case, it was sort of an earlier run at a similar kind of book. So that required rethinking. Suddenly, I have new material to work with, and some of it counteracts what I've already done, and some of it fits. And then I have to start asking questions: can this character A be character B? Can these two people meet? How does it all fit? And then fast forward another couple of months or so, and I'm another 100 or 200 pages into the book, and we get a letter. We find a letter. His manager finds a letter that he had written outlining where a lot of the plot threads were going. Not all of them, but some of them. So what you sort of had was a back and forth that was like George was out there sending me emails from the grave, So I would write some stuff. I would get some more stuff from him. It would be a pain in the ass because it wouldn't fit with what I'd done, and I'd have to think, okay, all right, how am I going to work with this? And just like any collaboration, there was some stuff that just wasn't going to work. There was some stuff of his that I try as I might, and I tried so many creative ways to get as much of his stuff in as possible. But there's always a few things that couldn't work. And then, there were, by the same token, once I got all his stuff together, there were some things of mine that didn't work, and I had to make calls. And when it came to a tie, I tried to give ties to George. So it was a real weird collaboration. It was a back and forth, as strange as that sounds.
I don't know why I'm imagining just like packages of notes written on cocktail napkins. But
Yeah.
it probably wasn't as sexy as that. It was probably just
No.
like typed pages, little
Yeah.
emails. Yeah.
It was, yep, that's exactly what it was.
Damn.
Boring.
Yeah. It is. No, I'm kidding. That's really fucking cool, though.
Yeah, yeah, it was neat. It was such a unique process. Obviously, I'll never write a book in this way again. It was really wild.
You said the second shipment had like 100 extra pages from him. What was the initial like group of pages? How long? Like, how much of this book did he actually write, and how much is it of you? Because this book is a fucking
Yeah,
brick almost, man.
yeah, it's long. I mean, I think his from everything I could figure out, his intentions were really to make it a brick. Uh, he wanted to go wide. He wanted to go big in scope, do all the things he couldn't do with small film budgets. So it was obvious from his setup that he just was going wider and wider and wider. So he wanted this to be big. He wanted it to sort of be a conversation stopper, and not stopper, but he sort of did want it to put a bookend on the whole zombie thing that he did. I would say he wrote about a third of the book, and then the notes were extensive enough that I would credit him with about half, about third actual text, and then with the notes, I would bump that up to a half.
Cool. So I want to get into a bit of the research, specifically beginning with you have a line in the acknowledgments that is, when it comes to understanding dead bodies, you can't ask for a better corpse club than, and then you give a bunch of names. Daniel, what is a corpse club?
A corpse club. Well, that is a club of corpses. No, what it is I use that term for a group of I think it was 3 people who were sort of my advisors I went to when I needed to know about dead bodies, how they decompose. There's the opening part of the book takes place in a morgue essentially, so I needed to know about autopsies and that kind of thing. So I would turn to these experts whenever I had blood and guts questions, essentially.
Nice. Any humorous anecdotes you can think of from these conversations? I mean, I can't imagine asking these folks questions about dead bodies would not result in something unexpected.
Well, I mean, I was always amused by the sort of joyousness of some of their responses. Like I would ask something, akin to what happens, what's a way someone could be injured where there's a lot of blood coming out of the neck or something. And then they would be like, oh, if you want a really beautiful blood spatter, then this is your vein right here. And then there was a lot of stuff, one of those corpse club members, would sort of on their own asked me, here's why zombies might eat brains, because they have high protein and stuff, not knowing that Romero was anti brain eating for zombies. But still, it was fun to see them sort of try to figure out, like, here's how you could crack open the skull to get to the brain. So people really got into it. It really, everywhere I went, people got into it. There's a big section of the book on a aircraft carrier. Mm-hmm. And I toured an aircraft carrier, and the guy leading the tour was a big Romero fan, as it just happenstance. And when he was giving me the tour, he would just come up with all these great deaths. He would say, "Oh, you know what you could do? You could have somebody get sucked into this engine," and so experts, zombies have so saturated culture that it doesn't really matter what kind of expert you run into. They're at least familiar enough with it that most of them really want to have fun with it, and it gets their creativity going.
I think that that is true for any job. If you go to someone who's had a job for a while, they have a catalog of great ways someone could die at that job, right, just ready to go. So I'm glad you gave that guy a way to release those thoughts. I'm imagining you just like approaching folks and telling them what you were doing, and I mean, George Romero is like the fucking goat, I guess, is what you would say now, and how they would freak out about this. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. And the head of my corpse club was a woman named Mary Roach, who's a very well-known nonfiction writer. She wrote Stiff and Grunt and these kind of great nonfiction books, and she's been a help on several books now. She's just indispensable member of my team, really. Yeah. Anything disgusting, she has all the science behind it.
I'm not a big zombie guy, and you mentioning how Romero was anti-brain eating, that's a good point. I mean, there's no brain mentioning in the original trilogy, as far as I remember. That was more like, what was it, Return of the Living Dead, or whatever that movie was?
It was Return of the Living Dead, yeah. He just thought the skull was too hard to get into, that they would go for the easier meat, and that's sort of the same rationale he had behind zombies being slow. Their bodies are just falling apart. They're they're not going to be fast. They're not going to bother with the brains. He was kind of very pragmatic about his dead bodies.
He had his opinions, and he was sticking by them. And
He sure was.
they make a lot of sense because, yeah, I don't think I could get into a skull as an alive human being, much less a dead one. I wouldn't know what to do.
No, you'd have to beat on it for a while with a sledgehammer, probably.
We'd have to console like a skull club, I guess. I don't.
Right. You'd have to assemble a congress of skull experts and really get into it.
Yeah, what do I have to do to get inside of this head?
Right.
I guess that's also what they ask when you enter like a therapy as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. Any other cool things you can think of from the research of this book? I mean, in the acknowledgments, you have a list of books that you read, like Walking Stiff, 2 Yields, 262 Bodies, and the Making of a Medical Examiner. That seems like a great read.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of research. A ton of it went into the aircraft carrier part because George had very nicely left me with the majority of that section to write, and I didn't know shit all about aircraft carriers and the Navy and military hierarchy. There was a lot to learn there, and I was starting from zero. Yeah.
I haven't finished the book yet because it's been an odd couple of months, as you might know. But I'm excited to get to that part of the book. That seems fun. I'm a big fan of closed settings, and you said a great section of the book takes place on this. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, he had clearly done a bunch of research, but he hadn't gotten that far into that section, so I had to really get into it. But all there's a section that takes place sort of in a cable news network, and I had to read up on how the news works, how they gather the news, how they decide what to air, and the problems and biases inherent in all that. I tend to write densely and with detail, so I really do a lot of research, kind of regardless of the book, and really try to fill it with detail. Even I mean, being cognizant that most people aren't going to care, but I want them to feel like I know what I'm talking about.
You recently tweeted something about how during the research of this book, you discovered the exact way you were to watch all of Romero's Living Dead movies, and it wouldn't be the way most people would think.
Right. Well, I mean, I would still recommend watching them in the order they were released, but there's another order to it. When I started researching just the Romero stuff, just trying to understand him and get inside his head, not inside his skull. I don't mean trying to get literally inside his brain, but one of the real tasks was figuring out the chronology, the sort of narrative chronology of the zombie epidemic that he set out, which does not follow the chronology of the release dates. He sort of, as you know, he sort of ignored the decade shifts. Night of the Living Dead was 1968. Dawn of the Dead was 1979. But despite that gap, one occurs just 3 weeks after the other. So you have to sort of ignore the decade shifts and focus on how long after the zombie epidemic did each film take place. So what I figured out is that it's all over the map. The first film is Night of the Living Dead. The second film is Diary of the Dead. The third film is Survival of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead is fourth. Land of the Dead is fifth. And Day of the Dead is sixth. So, and I pretty much definitively found all that information. And some of it was from commentary tracks. Some of it was interviews he had done. Some of them stated in the movies. Dawn of the Dead hints it in the movie, but spells it out in the novelization that he wrote. So and then one of them was just from the script. They don't say it in the movie. I think it's Day of the Dead. They don't state in the movie how long it's been, but in the script they do. So I kind of figured it out. And the idea was that once I figured out points 1 through 6, it would help me understand what points 7, 8, and 9 would be. You could start to chart the arc of it.
Yeah, because The Living Dead is supposed to be in the very beginning, correct?
This book, yeah,
Yeah,
this book covers all of it.
Yeah.
So it reboots it from to the beginning, just as he
Yeah.
did with Diary of the Dead.
Right.
And then there's a smaller section in the middle. The book is in 3 acts, and the middle act, the second act, sort of is where his movies go. So the idea, the reason it's so short, the second act, is so that you can sort of plug in the movies there. And then it continues on for another 10 years past his timeline. Day of the Dead was the furthest out, and that went 5 years. Day of the Dead took place 5 years after the zombie virus. So the book actually goes 15 years out.
Gotcha. Once again, I apologize for not having this done in time. I should have known that if I had finished the book, but I have not yet.
Oh, listen, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's a long book. Take your time.
I am enjoying it. I will finish it. I promise. I recommend, highly recommend anyone who's listening to go pick this up. The Living Dead. I mean, if you enjoyed these movies at all as a kid, this is like a dream come true. This is something that I couldn't even imagine happening. And now it's in my hand right now as I talk to you. The ultimate Living Dead Bible, basically.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine it either.
Yeah, I bet. Good God. Okay, yeah. I wanted to end the episode with talking about that tweet you made because I thought that was pretty cool and something I had never thought about. And have you revisited all those movies in that specific order yet? I kind of want to now.
No, I mean, I think the next time, I mean, it'll be some years, but the next time that I want to go through them all, I will try that. But it's going to be a while because I keep on having reasons to watch individual ones. Like I did a podcast episode that was all about Survival of the Dead, and I've got one coming up on Day of the Dead. So I'm sort of revisiting them yet again individually. So to sit down and plow through all 6 of them for just fun, I'm going to put that off. It won't be fun for a while. I'm going to put that off.
I keep thinking like how sometimes indie movie theaters like Alamo Drafthouse, they will sponsor with someone who's written a book to like show something that is similar to the book they wrote, maybe. And man, I would love like the Alamo or someplace similar to do like a fucking marathon of all 6 of these movies, like with you in attendance. That would be pretty cool.
I mean, I can't. I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it, but
okay.
But yeah, we had Drafthouse. We had big plans with the Draft House. They have been radically shifted. We're still going to do something with them, but it won't have the scope of what we were originally planning.
Damn. Well, I'm glad I was on the right track with that one.
You really were.
It seemed like the right idea, at least. Oh well. How can folks find you online, Daniel?
The easiest way is just to go to danielkraus.com. That's Kraus, and then I'll have the links to all my social media and stuff. I occasionally will, sign off a social media platform for a year or something. So I can't confirm which ones I'll be on at any given time.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, this has been The Living Dead. Go buy it right now. Not you, Daniel. You probably have a copy. But
I have a copy, yes.
Cool. I'm glad they gave you one.
Thanks.
Woo! And that's been an episode of Ghoulish. I am Max Booth, a host. And if you liked today's episode, go rate and review us on iTunes. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/PMM Publishing. If you want a spooky Ghoulish t-shirt, go on over to tpublic/user/PMM Publishing. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghoulish Pod. You can follow us on Instagram at PMM Publishing. You can email us a spooky thing that's happened to you, and I might read it on the podcast. Email us ghoulishpod@gmail.com. And go buy the books we publish at perpetualpublishing.com.
Well, remember, rate and review the podcast. It helps our rankings.
Live spooky, die spooky.